Mary was just in time to grab the milk from the Arga as it bubbled up to the edge of the saucepan. She poured it over the black coffee, then rubbed her hands warm. As she sat down in the kitchen chair, she glanced through the window to check that the Earl of Westerfield was still in his usual place. It was as much a part of her morning routine as brushing her teeth. The toast poised mid-air on the way to her mouth. Her jaw fell open. A sound came out of her throat, which was something between a magpie's strangled squawk and a vixen's scream. The Earl of Westerfield was gone. She dropped her toast and ran out of the front door, nearly flattening the scallywag as she went. He hissed at her and hunched his back. "Stupid old Moggy!" she shouted as she stormed across the lawn towards the church. The bare patch where the plinth had stood for almost a century confirmed her fears. Tyre tracks led away from the courtyard and through the metal gates where the thieves had backed up a vehicle. The metal chain hung from the open gate where someone had sawn through it. Atop the wrought iron gate, the Westerfield crest of a bear's paw with its claws protracted. Suddenly, an ironic symbol of impotence. How often had she warned the church preservation people that it was only a matter of time before the thieves went off with him? That amount of bronze melted down would be worth thousands. She had asked them time and time again to put the sculpture of the church's patron on the vicarage lawn where she could keep an eye on him. She jumped up and down on the bare earth like a 2-year-old having a tantrum and let out a bellow which would have brought the neighbours running, if there were any. The village was 2 miles away. She got out her mobile and phoned Matthew from Church Preservation. "Morning, Mary. How are you today?" Between gritted teeth, she said, "He's gone." "Who's gone?" "The Earl." Some paper rustled and he cleared his throat. Have you looked for him?" "What do you mean, looked for him? It's a ton-weight sculpture, for God's sake. You can't just go and take a walk." "Now, calm down, take some deep breaths. Don't patronise me." "Have you phoned the police?" "Not yet." "Well, let's try and be calm about this. I'll phone the police and they'll be down there to sort it out. I'm sure if we act quickly, they'll be able to do something." The young policeman shook his head while looking at the bare patch where the Earl had stood. She didn't know whether to feel sorry for the baby-faced PC who'd come out on his own to investigate the theft, or tell him to pull his bloody socks up. "Any strangers been round that you've noticed?" "Of course. Practically all the visitors are strangers. This is a very beautiful church. People come from miles, Germany, America, Canada, you name it. If you name it, I've had visitors from it." "Any unsavoury characters, suspicious looking?" Mary narrowed her eyes. "Well, there are always less desirables, of course. Some of them dig up snowdrop bulbs from the graves. I come out here and tell them to bugger off and go and buy their own. Oh, they're expensive, those snowdrops. Mum sent me down garden centre for some the other day." "Yes, well, help yourself, Constable." She gestured towards the white spears that were poking up through the grass. "Communal land, after all." Mary raised her eyebrows. "Oh, sorry, Mrs. Samuels, getting off the point. So, you didn't see or hear anything?" "Not a dicky bird." "Heavy sleeper, are you?" "Well, not especially." "Don't you find it a bit creepy in that big old house up there on your own?" "I sleep with a 12-bore under my bed." "Oh, got a licence for that?" "It was a joke, Constable." "Oh, I see. Very funny." He stuck the tip of his tongue out the corner of his mouth and scribbled something in the pad. "That old bat lives alone with cat and 12-bore, Mary imagined. "Well, I'll put details onto the computer and see what comes up." "Oh, what? You're just going to type some report into a computer and that's it?" Mary scrunched her hair in exasperation. "Oh, not much else we can do. I haven't got resources, I'm afraid. I can send the crime prevention officer along this afternoon. She can advise you on future security measures." "Well, you can keep your crime, what's the name?" He shuffled from foot to foot, avoiding her gaze by taking more notes. Mary continued. "Surely you can contact the local papers, let them know. We've got to try and get it back before the thieves melt it down. Got any photos of the old Earl?" "Oh, follow me." Mary led the constable inside the church. The morning sun shone in through the stained-glassed window. Archangel Michael's robe flooded the chancel with ruby light. The constable drew in his breath at the sight of it. Impressive, isn't it? Mary nodded at the window, feeling the familiar swell of ownership in her heart, forgetting her frustration for a moment. Such a shame it's not used anymore. We're only ever full to the rafters these days for funerals. She gave him a copy of the church leaflet. As church custodian, it was her job to see they were replenished from time to time. She leafed to a photo of the sculpture. This, do you? Haven't got it digitised, have you? Mary gave him the look she reserved for visitors who didn't leave a donation in the money box. No, all right, leave it with me then, Mrs. Samuels. A few flyers might help as well. You know, in the local area. He nodded hopefully. Oh, don't tell me, under-resourced. She zipped up the collar of her fleece body warmer. I'll handle Operation Flyer. Later that afternoon, Mary distributed flyers at the local shop, school and village hall, and on the way back home stopped at the Moon Inn. She pinned up a flyer on their notice board next to the bar and caught sight of herself in the mirror that hung alongside it. Running her fingers through her grey curly hair, she attempted to smooth it down, but it only sprung up again, like a jack-in-the-box. She was getting a feral look that reminded her of Scallywag. She dug her nails into her palms and squashed the temptation aroused by the smell of a single malt as the landlord poured himself a chaser. Zigzagging her way back home along the pothole track to the vicarage, the nail marks in her palms faded and her breathing calmed. Doing something about the theft had made her feel slightly better. The temper she'd felt that morning had subsided. That afternoon she sat in the church thinking about what had happened. A lot of people in the village thought she'd taken the post of church custodian because of her religious background. This wasn't the case, although she loved the tranquility of the church and often meditated there. Mary took a deep breath, absorbing the building's calm. Her probation officer had found the job for her. She thought it would be better for Mary to have a clean start somewhere new after she'd served her sentence. Stroking the back of the oak pew, Mary imagined all the people who had worshipped there. If only someone was there now, someone who could help. The Earl's theft had stirred bad feelings again. Clasping her hands together in her lap, she prayed to the Archangel Michael for strength as he stood there weighing souls, deciding whether to send them left or right, meting out justice. As the evening darkened, she turned the enormous key in the lock and secured the church door. It felt wrong, but she had instructions from Matthew not to take any chances. She walked back towards the house, her brisk footsteps the only sound in the hush of dusk. She had baked beans on toast for tea. As she washed up, the smell of single malt from the pub still lingered in her nostrils. She had one bottle hidden away for emergencies. The smell took her back to evenings in prison, watching Big Brother with the girls, sipping whiskey-spiked tea behind the screws' backs. She'd worried the other women wouldn't like her because she was posh. When they found out she'd killed her old man, they took her into the fold. "He deserved it, way he treated you," they said. They called her Mare for short. Silly Mare, sometimes, to tease her. She hadn't been called Mare since boarding school. The familiar burn flooded through her body as she downed 3 glasses in rapid succession. Evenings like this, she longed for the sound of female chatter from the games room, or Celine coming along and slipping a ciggy in her pocket, her slender fingers warm against her thigh. The bottle next to her feet was half empty when Mary fell asleep in front of the Arga. Something scratching at the window startled her awake. The clock said midnight. It'll be Scallywag. She stood up, wobbled, then grabbed the Arga rail to steady herself. Slowly she inched her way to the kitchen sink and splashed some water over her face. There was cold coffee left in the percolator, which she drank back in one gulp. Outside, she called the stray and put down a bowl of cat food for him. There was no sign of him. Shrugging her shoulders, she turned to go back inside. Her back stiffened as the sound of an engine drew near. Hesitating in the doorway, She looked back to see what was coming. Her pupils narrowed in the beam of the headlights. Back inside the house, she put down the latch on the Yale lock and went to the phone. 9, and her finger hovered over the final 9 before clicking the receiver back down. She went upstairs, holding the handrail as she climbed. It was a bright, waxing moon, and the light shone through her bedroom window, throwing rectangles of light onto the carpet. From outside came the dull clunk of 2 car doors closing. 2 figures walked up the path towards the church. Perps always returned to the scene of the crime, didn't they? The lifers had told her that. One of the men tried the handle on the church door. He turned to the other one, who then walked back to the vehicle. He opened the boot and took out a long, heavy implement. He put it casually over his shoulder, like an axeman intending to fell a tree. Mary squatted down next to her bed and pulled something from underneath it. She got up carefully, onto her knees first, supporting herself with one hand on the bed as she rose. She walked over to the sash window, pulled down the top half, and rested the barrel of her 12-bore next to the latch. She followed the axeman in her sight as he walked back towards the church door. Her hands were steady now, and her head suddenly clear. She pressed the gun deeper into her shoulder. Slowly, she pulled back the hammer.